We're going to do day 4 of macro unit 2. We're going over fluctuations in aggregate demand, aggregate supply. The first note is about the difference between real GDP and nominal GDP. Real GDP can only increase when the economy produces more output. Nominal GDP will change when there's just an increase in the price level. I have a note here that in 1923, Germany's nominal GDP was the highest in the world. They had hyperinflation in Germany at the time, and in 1923, November, a loaf of bread cost 10 billion mark, which is up from 33 cents 4 years earlier. Hyperinflation, not good. Their nominal GDP was huge because the prices were huge, but the real GDP was actually shrinking in Germany. Germany had a huge stagflation problem. So let's show a recession using aggregate supply, aggregate demand. This would be caused by a leftward shift of aggregate demand. It's important to label here on the x-axis we have our output. So at 5%, this is full employment. This is our equilibrium. Wherever aggregate supply equals aggregate demand, this is going to be where we currently are. So right now, AS equals AD at Y2. And actually, if we're going to start initially, this would be my AD1. There would be a leftward shift of aggregate demand. We can see how the price level is going to drop as well. So we're at equilibrium. There's a crash, an economic catastrophe, a terrorist attack, something that decreases aggregate demand. This means consumption, investment spending, government spending, or net X. One of these will drop. And AD drops. And what happens is due to, and this is Keynes calls this underconsumption, due to the decrease of aggregate demand, people are not going to as many businesses, as many restaurants, because restaurants can't renegotiate their contracts. They cannot reprint their menus because businesses have sticky wages and sticky prices. They cannot adjust to the decrease in aggregate demand. They cut production. They can't lower their prices quick enough. So at this point, we would say that unemployment is greater, so maybe unemployment is 7%. Employment is less, and our real output is less, and price levels fall. This is a recession. So we're going to go through this again. This could be caused by a terrorist attack, a burst bubble, the housing market, .com, bank failures. It could be caused by rapidly increasing tax rates in a nation. It could be the threat of war could cause this as well. Aggregate demand shifts to the left. Real GDP and price levels fall. The economy is no longer producing at max output. They are producing below max output. But over time, and this is where it's really important, over time, aggregate supply is going to shift to the right. This happens for two reasons, and this is where flexible wages come in. First of all, people expect price levels to drop. As price levels continue to drop, producers realize the prices are going to fall, so they're going to increase production to take advantage of the higher prices before they fall too much. Two, and this is a better explanation, unemployment at Q2 is higher than Q1. Let's actually call this Y2 and Y1. Unemployment at Y2 is higher than Y1. So the supply of workers, the quantity supplied, is greater than the quantity demanded. When supply is greater than demand, prices fall. We have a surplus of workers. Maybe you're not willing to work for 10% less when you have the job, but when you're unemployed, you'll go back for 10% less. So the other reason aggregate supply shifts to the right is wages drop. And when this happens, this is flexible, and this is what the classical economists think. The unemployment will fix itself, the economy will fix itself and will go back to a long-run equilibrium at 5% unemployment. We started up here, leftward shift of demand, counter shift of supply. We're back to equilibrium. Output remains the same. The price level has fallen, but real GDP stays the same. There are other fluctuations. If we have a leftward shift of aggregate supply, this is called stagflation. This is really, really bad for the economy because prices are getting more expensive and more people are out of work. At least with a recession, price levels fall and eventually it fixes itself. Here there is no fix because workers won't go back for less money because prices are getting more expensive. So what will happen in the long run in stagflation, if there is no change to aggregate supply, if there's no intervention, what will happen in the long run is the economy will end up shrinking. In the long run will shift to where the short run is. Really bad for an economy. Stagflation, awful for an economy. And the last thing we'll talk about is an inflationary gap. This is kind of where the United States is right now. We're operating outside of the long-run aggregate supply. So lower unemployment, lower than the natural rate. So what is happening in our economy right now is it's harder for businesses to find workers because everybody has a job. Additionally, since so many people are working, there's a lot of disposable income. People go to restaurants, movies, travel. There's demand for goods and services, which A, is causing prices to go up, but also businesses cannot meet that demand. So they can't find enough workers to meet the demand with supply, which is also causing prices to go up. So this is why it's called an inflationary gap, because prices are inflating, they're rising. If there is no change, no intervention by the Federal Reserve or the government here, what you're going to have is a leftward shift of aggregate supply. As wages continue to rise, supply is going to shift left. So resources are working overtime. Eventually, aggregate supply would shift left, and we would once again return to equilibrium. This is why we have a business cycle. We have a boom, then a bust, and then a boom, and then a bust, because the economy is self-correcting.